Typically, there are a ton of rivalry games that are played the last weekend of college football, but you guys already know about most of the big ones, like the Iron Bowl or the Game. But in today's video, I want to talk about 10 underrated rivalries that you probably know nothing about. We're obviously going to go through what the matchup is, the history of the rivalry, and just other information that you need to know. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you can support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about 10 underrated rivalry games that you don't know about. Okay, so the first one is the Rio Grande rivalry. That is between New Mexico and New Mexico State, which is known as the Rio Grande rivalry or the Battle of I-25. The two teams just created a new trophy, which is a chili roaster called the Roaster. But this is a rivalry game that goes back a lot further than just last season. It was first played in 1894, before New Mexico was even a state. New Mexico won the first game over New Mexico A&M, and they haven't let up on the lead in the series since then. As of 2025, the Lobos have a 75-35-5 record against the Aggies. Part of what makes this game so interesting is that these two schools, despite just being 3 hours apart, haven't really been in the same conference all that often. In fact, the last time they were in the same conference was 1951, when New Mexico left the Border Conference to join what would eventually become the Skyline Conference. New Mexico beat New Mexico State 110-3 in 1917 and had an 18-game winning streak over the Aggies from 1938 to 1958. But this rivalry is one of the hottest in college sports because of what happens off the field. In the 2023 version of the game, video got released that appeared to show Diego Pavia doing something on the carpet in the New Mexico locker room. Just the year before that, New Mexico State basketball players got into a fight with the New Mexico students, which eventually led to a New Mexico State player killing a New Mexico student in a gunfight a week later. It's one of the most hate-filled rivalry games in college sports, and honestly needs to be toned down. The next one is the Battle for the Milk Can. That is between Boise State and Fresno State. There is an actual jug of milk in this game, which is played between Boise State and Fresno. The milk can itself was created in 2005 as a trophy between the two teams, and the game became a rivalry in 2001 when Boise State joined the WAC and upset Fresno State, who was ranked number 8 in the country. It's a milk can because both the cities of Boise and Fresno are connected to the dairy industry, and the game followed the two schools to the Mountain West and has been one of the biggest rivalry games in that conference since then, and even though it's new and not that well known, it'll be one of the biggest games in the new Pac-12. Despite it not being a rivalry until the 2000s, the two teams first played each other in 1977 when the Bulldogs won 42-7. They didn't meet again until 1984 when Fresno won 37-21, and then in 1996, the Bulldogs won 41-7. But Boise State has done a lot of growing since then, and the Broncos currently hold the series lead 17-9, and it's the longest winning streak in the game, with 7 straight victories from 2006 to 2012. Lots of you have probably heard this next rivalry, and it's the first FCS rivalry on the list, but you probably don't know that much about the Dakota marker. It is the game between North Dakota State and South Dakota State, and while the trophy didn't exist until 2004, there's actually a lot of history behind the two teams and the trophy itself. The trophy is a big hunk of rock that's meant to emulate some actual stone markers that at one time outlined the border between North and South Dakota. The trophy was made official in 2004 after both teams moved from Division II to the FCS, and it was announced at a town that was on the North Dakota and South Dakota border. The rivalry goes back a lot further than that though, as the game was first played in 1903, and North Dakota State has won the majority of the games, having a 65-47 record against the Rabbits. More recently, the game has become a precursor to the national title game, with both of these teams being some of the best programs in the country. In 21 trophy games that have been played, North Dakota State holds a slight edge with 11 wins to South Dakota State's 10. It's a pretty evenly matched game, even though the Bison have been a dynasty in that time period. What's also interesting is that 12 of the last 19 games were won by the home team, so there is a 63% chance the home team will win. Okay, we'll stay in the Midwest for one of the more underrated college football rivalries out there, and that's Toledo versus Bowling Green, otherwise known as the Battle of I-75. The MAC doesn't really get a lot of attention for its rivalry games, but this game has been going on for over 100 years, and after this season's matchup, it's all tied up. So, it's also one of the most evenly matched ones in the sport. The two schools are just 25 miles apart alongside Interstate 75, which is obviously how it got its name. The two teams played for the Peace Pipe Trophy from 1980 to 2011, which was then changed to the Battle of I-75 Trophy. Despite being in different divisions for a long time in the MAC, neither team has ever played each other in the MAC conference title game, and what's interesting is the game is tied at 43-43 after this one. The first game ever played was a 6-0 Toledo win in 1919, and the longest win streak in the history of the game was 12 games between 1955 and 1966, and all of them were won by Bowling Green. But what makes this rivalry one of the most underrated in sports is the fact it's built into the stadiums of its teams. Toledo's historic Glass Bowl was built in 1937, but in 1961, the school actually bought a military rocket and placed it outside of their stadium, pointed directly at Bowling Green Stadium. As far as I'm concerned, Toledo is the only school in college sports that has an actual weapon of war threatening another school. Up next, we need to talk about the Battle of Palouse. That is Idaho versus Washington State. One of the most underrated ones in the FCS is located in the Pacific Northwest, and that is between Idaho and Washington State. The Palouse is a hilly area known for great farming in Washington and western Idaho, which is where both of these campuses are. Washington State is in Pullman, and Idaho is in Moscow. In fact, the campuses are only 8 miles apart, which is sort of nuts, and the game was first played over 130 years ago in 1894, which Washington State won 10-0. Both schools were actually members of what would eventually become the Pac-12, and that ranged from 1922 to 1958. It's one of the most lopsided rivalry games in college football history, with the Cougars holding a 74-17-3 lead over the Vandals. The Cougars hold every record for the game, holding the longest winning streak with 20, the largest margin of victory with an 84-27 win, and have won the last 11 games since 2001. The weird thing is that the FBS split into the FBS and FCS essentially in 1978, and Idaho didn't move up until 1996. A weird historical fact is that in order to get their attendance numbers high enough, they had to play a few games at Washington State's Martin Stadium because the Kibbe Dome didn't have that many seats. Only 12 games were played with both teams at the FBS level before Idaho moved back down in 2018. The last game played in Idaho was in 1966, and they've played more recently in Spokane and Seattle than they ever have in Moscow. The next one is the 100 Miles of Hate, which is Western Kentucky versus Middle Tennessee. This is honestly one of the best rivalry games in the group of 6 right now, and it's earned its name due to the 100 miles on US Route 231 that separate the two campuses. It also earned it because these two teams have been tied to the hip pretty much since they started playing football. The first game was played in 1914, and Middle Tennessee won 47-0. Each team has traded winning streaks with each other, with a one-off win being pretty rare. It's another rivalry game that has been evenly matched throughout its course, with WKU holding a 38-35 record over the Blue Raiders. They also have the largest win in the history of the game, winning 54-0 in 1978, and the longest win streak, which was 7 games from 1928 to 1934. The rivalry went on hiatus in 1991 when Middle Tennessee moved up to the FBS and left WKU behind, but it returned when WKU moved up to the FBS. It went on an even shorter hiatus when Middle Tennessee left the Sun Belt for Conference USA until WKU joined them a year later. Recently, there's been a lot of anger from the Hilltoppers in this game, especially since the MAC was apparently interested in adding both teams. But Middle Tennessee backed out last second to stay in the Conference USA, so the MAC bailed on both schools. The next one is a matchup that you probably haven't heard of, and that is the game between Wyoming and Hawaii. It isn't as big of a rivalry as some of the other games on this list, but with Colorado State leaving the Mountain West, I can see this game becoming a lot more important to both teams. This cowboy rivalry is huge because there are apparently a ton of Wyoming cowboys that actually live in the state of Hawaii. The trophy is a bronze cowboy twirling a lasso, and it was created by some people in Wyoming. The original trophy went missing in 1997, and it wasn't brought back until a new one was made in 2013. It's a pretty young rivalry though, as it first started in 1978 when Hawaii joined the WAC, and Wyoming leads the all-time series with a 17-11 record against the Warriors all-time. They have the largest victory with a 66-0 victory in 1996, and then Wyoming left both the WAC and Hawaii behind to create the Mountain West. The game ended up going on hiatus after 1997 until Hawaii joined the Mountain West for football in 2011. It was resumed in 2013, and Wyoming won a thriller 59-56 in overtime. Hawaii would then win their first game in the series since 1992 the following season, and it's honestly not that interesting, as Wyoming has sort of declined, and Hawaii could not keep up their momentum from the June Jones and Colt Brennan days. But if both teams continue to improve, it could be one of the better group of 6 rivalries at some point. We have another super interesting rivalry for our next one, and that is the Paint Bucket Bowl between Arkansas State and Memphis. It is basically one of the most fun traditions in college sports history, and it's the reason behind the name. The two schools had an area on their campus that they created and designated as an area to be painted. The winning team painted that place when they won. That tradition turned into their trophy as a bucket of paint. First two teams met in 1914 when Arkansas State ended up beating Memphis, which was then called West Tennessee University. Over the next 61 games in the series, Memphis would start to take hold of the rivalry and has a 33-23-5 record against Arkansas State since then. Memphis also holds the longest winning streak in the series with 10 games from 1991 to 2004 and once beat Arkansas State 68-0. The last time the game was played was in 2023 when Memphis beat the Red Wolves 37-3, and it isn't coming back until next season, but that will start a 4-game series that will keep the game in the rotation for both schools' schedules in the foreseeable future. It's also worth noting that Memphis has been flirting with joining the Big 12, ACC, or Pac-12 at some point, and Arkansas State, on the other hand, has seemed pretty content in the Sun Belt, and I'd honestly be surprised if they ever leave. But the two campuses are pretty close, and it's a good thing the two athletic departments are interested in keeping the game going. From there, we'll go back up to the Midwest to the Cleveland area for the battle for the wagon wheel between Akron and Kent State. Like Bowling Green and Toledo, which is the other MAC rivalry on this list, Akron and Kent State aren't that far apart either. They're only about 10 miles away, but the weird thing is they didn't originally start as much of rivals. The first recorded meeting was in 1923 when Akron beat Kent State 32-0. Since they aren't that far from each other, the game has been played often, but it wasn't until Akron joined the MAC in 1992 that the game became a super big rivalry. In 1946, the two schools created a trophy in the form of a blue and gold wagon wheel, and that would be contested in each matchup, given the nickname of the blue and gold wagon wheel game. While the all-time record has Akron leading 37-28-2, the trophy series actually belongs to Kent State, who has a 27-26-1 record against the Zips. Both of these teams haven't been very good lately, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about the game here. Akron's last MAC title was in 2005, and Kent State's last conference title was 1972. But they're both located in Ohio, and like Bowling Green and Toledo, are pretty ingrained in the MAC culture. For both of these teams, it's the game that they circle on their schedule because it might be the only game they can win. It's a really interesting rivalry dynamic because there's a lot of desperation around the game, and Akron has won most of the recent matchups. Finally, our last one on the list is a game called the Rivalry. That's between Lehigh and Lafayette. It is the most played rivalry game in college football history, with 160 total meetings, dating all the way back to 1884, and is also the longest uninterrupted rivalry in college football history. The two schools are both located in Pennsylvania, just 17 miles away from each other. Lafayette won the first game 56-0 and currently holds the all-time record with an 82-73-5 record against Lehigh. But Lehigh holds the scoring record, beating Lafayette 78-0 in 1917, while the Leopards have the longest win streak in the game's history with 10 from 1919 to 1928. It is such an important and historical game that it actually has a documentary about it on PBS, and Sports Illustrated once told its readers that it's one game every college football fan has to attend at some point. Given its long history, it's had a lot of moments, and the 150th version was played in Yankee Stadium on TV. It's even rumored that the idea of tearing down the goalpost was actually created as a result of this game as well. The rivalry is so iconic to the history of college football that it's just called the Rivalry, and not that many people outside of the FCS even know much about it, but that's why I wanted to put it on the list. So yeah, today I talked about 10 unique rivalries in college football, and I know there are tons more, so drop one down so I can do part 2. Also be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.